Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm really excited about today's guest, Katie Hornor. She's founder and CEO of the Flamingo brand, which we will hear about shortly. She's also just released her new book titled The Flamingo Advantage: How to Leverage Unique, Stay Relevant, and Change the World. Talk about that, and she just surpassed 1,000 YouTube subscribers, so check that out as well. So Katie, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I know we had connected through Podmatch, and you have a really interesting. You're a digital nomad, and tell us about your story, and it's gonna be a great conversation.
Well, thank you. My husband and I decided to move to Mexico about 16 years ago to do ministry work. And we worked at the Bible college, we worked at a children's home, and then we found ourselves without ministry work and without the funding that was with that and had to start a business. And so we initially started a homeschool curriculum business in the Spanish language, then took what we learned doing that and started coaching online business owners, which is what we're doing today. And through all of that, we've sort of evolved our brand. The Flamingo has kind of adopted us through a series of events. And we get to teach people how to be authentically them inside and out, and to use their business as a way to leverage that uniqueness to create the change in the world that they were made to create.
Yeah, no, what's interesting is tell us like how the Flamingo brand came about and what are pink marketing strategy.
Flamingo branding, all of that started with a little family trip up the river in a rented fishing boat. We were going to go see flamingos in the wild. We'd never seen them outside of a zoo or a video, and decided this was the thing to do. And rounding the river, going upstream, I just was not prepared for what I saw. Pink fluffy clouds everywhere in the middle of like this expanse of blue and green. And it just absolutely blew my mind. And the closer we got to them, the closer we got as we approached the flamingos, I was even more flabbergasted because they just stood there. Like, they weren't scared of us. They didn't ruffle their feathers. They didn't get all anxious. They didn't move away. Like, they just continued to stand there in this river full of tourists and crocodiles and do what they were created to do. And the impact of that, like as we came away from that trip, I just kept thinking about these crazy pink birds. I started to research them. And the more that I found out about the flamingos, the more analogies that came to me in terms of how business owners are like flamingos, or people in general. Like, so many of the people even have some really cool things that they can do, or that they know how to teach, or these skills and abilities, and yet they don't think it's anything special. Just like the flamingos don't even think about being special out there, and yet to us it's so amazing and odd and unique and crazy, right? Yeah. And so we took those and started using them in our teaching and then it became the first book, Faith Like Flamingos. Then it became the second book, The Flamingo Advantage. And now we have a whole coaching program named after flamingos, and it's just become this big thing. Then we love it.
Yeah, I love it. And I assume, when you're talking about the Flamingo Advantage, and then one thing is, I really love how you took this concept and you made it into a brand, and everything's centered around the brand. What is this? You have? You also have, memorabilia as well, and you have this flower. What is the story behind the flower that you wear?
Well, the flower is part of my flamingo advantage. It's part of what makes me unique. And the story with that is that we live in tropical Mexico. That's where our home base is anyway. And one day, several years ago, I had to get ready to teach an online class. It was hot and humid, like it usually is here. I was a mess. Little children running around the home, because we also home educate our kids. And so I grabbed my daughter's headband with a flower on it and stuck it in my hair to get presentable quick and turn on the video. And everyone was like, "Oh, I love your flower." And then, so I didn't think anything about it. But next week I showed up without it, and they were like, "Where's the flower, Katie? We love the flower." And so I started wearing this flower more often. And as I did, it was sort of like I started realizing how much I had stuffed the fun part of Katie down inside to please other people throughout my life. And wearing the flower made me feel fun again. It made me feel pretty again. And God used it to just remind me that it's okay to be me. And that weaves into the whole flamingo thing too, about being authentic, and who you are on the inside gets to come out on the outside. Flamingos are pink all the way through. Their flesh is pink, their blood is pink, like everything about them is pink. It's not just the outside color. And so the flower helps me. It's my physical reminder every day that I get to show up and be me today.
Yeah. And really this idea of this freedom, you have this freedoms, individual freedom. You don't have to conform to a certain narrative. You have and you've created this brand. It's really, you've had over 250 podcasts. You've Amazon bestsellers. You've spoke on stages, run your own blog website. So you've created this freedom for yourself. You know, if you today you decided you didn't want to work, you have that choice. You know, and nobody's, and now you live all over the world in this as a digital, or in this, no, you have location freedom. So tell people about this idea, because most people, especially doctors, they think you have this one salary and you're financially free. But, you know, that's kind of not, after COVID, that's not really the case anymore. So tell people about these types of freedoms.
Well, we knew from our past and our history, we were part of a charitable organization for a while where all of our funding came in through donations. And so when we started our business, one of the big things that we wanted was that financial freedom to be able to live and give as we felt like God was directing us on a day-to-day basis, and not have to be subject to other people's ideas or to the boss and the approvals and the, like, all of those things, right? Sound familiar, I'm sure. And so we were trying to figure out, like, how can we make money, number one, but then how can we have multiple streams of income so that we can do that? And so 7 years ago, the Lord allowed us to buy a historic home here in tropical Mexico, which we've been slowly restoring and turning into a bed and breakfast or Airbnb space. And so we've got one of those units able to rent out now as an additional stream of income. We're planning to put our entire historical home, like the entire house, we're going to pack it up and get that ready to rent out as a long-term rental in the winter, because we want to take our family somewhere else and experience something else this winter. Right. So there's that. Then we have the books and the speaking, which, you know, may or may not bring in much in terms of salary on a month-to-month basis. But they do help us get the word out. Then we have our coaching and our programs where we're training other entrepreneurs. And so there's multiple streams of income for us to be able to come in. And like you said, we've created the life. If we could live anywhere, where would we want to live? Well, for the last 12 years, it's been right here in tropical Mexico, right? And if we could work any schedule we wanted to work, what would that look like? So I don't start work until after lunch on Mondays. I usually work, I do my trainings and meetings on Tuesdays. I do my client work on Wednesdays, and then I'm usually off Thursday and Friday to have family time and go do whatever it is that we're doing, or go speak at events and things. And so we're able to design our lifestyle around what serves us and brings us joy, and still allows us to fulfill that purpose that we were given and able to impact other people in the world.
Yeah. And I really love that. And I really want to point out, because a lot of the audience, they're still on this traditional industrial model of retirement. Whereas, like, I read this great book over the weekend where it's talking about, you know, you spend like your 20s all the way up to your 60s, you know, again, you know, we're talking about playing games and corporate, you know, backstabbing, you know, these organizations. But when people ask you, you know, how are you able to do this? Because they're coming from this mindset of, you know, you had to trade your time for money for 60 years. Hopefully at the end of it, you could, you know, what do you say to these individuals?
I would ask them to begin to dream, number one. Like, forget the time for money equation, and just, like, if you could do anything in the world that you wanted to do and get paid for it, what would you do? And then when you have that answer in your head, like, then start asking, how could I do that? Right. So many things, so many times in our life, in my own story, people have said, you can't do that. Or how could you do that? Right. And it's sort of this, like, aggressive, like, putting you down thing, squashing your dreams. If God has put that in your heart, like, go after it. Right. Like, don't say, I can't. Say, how could I? And we do this with our kids too. Instead of saying, oh, we could never afford, or we could never do, like, don't say that. Like, stop. And what if we could? What would that look like? What's the first step to get there? right? How could we just up and move to Mexico with a 6-month-old child? Well, the first step was saying, what would that look like? And what's the first step, right? For us, it meant that we didn't buy a house, we rented because we wanted the freedom to up and move when we were ready to go, right? And so things like that, like what if you sold your house and started renting so that you could live nomadic if you wanted to when you got your finances in order? It's just dreaming and then asking yourself, what's the next step?
Yeah. And the more I talk to entrepreneurs, just, through this podcast and, a lot of reading and just through masterminds, the more I talk to people, it's like the whole mainstream, like 95% of people are sold this narrative, and it's kind of like this fairy tale, and people have to conform to it. And then, when people don't have bosses, when people are entrepreneurs, they kind of look at you weird, and they're like, how is this possible? Or they look at you skeptical. So it's just quite interesting to see people doing things outside of the box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's a big piece in like imposter syndrome and allowing those I can'ts to hold you back. But if you look at like what's going to bring you joy and who are the people that you need to serve to do that, most of the people criticizing and commenting negatively are not those people, right? And so if they are not a part of your business or your business administration team, and they're not a part of the people that you're trying to serve, then why are you listening to them?
I know we spend so much time trying to gain the approval of others that, we don't really know, or we don't know their story, they don't know ours. And it's kind of like, and most of the time they don't really care anyways. They're still in their heads and everybody's in their own world. So talk about leveraging uniqueness for growth, finding your unique advantage, finding your flamingo, as you say.
Yeah. Well, I think some people would call this their unique selling position, right? Like what makes you different from all the others? And I have this saying that there's lots of other people in the world who do what you do. We need that. It's called market relevance, right? Like you have to prove there's a market for this. Somebody's buying it, somebody's selling it. And so it's okay for you to do something that somebody else does. But the truth is, nobody in the world does what you do like you do, right? And that's where we want to distinguish ourselves. That's where we want to find out what makes you, you. I just did a podcast recording on my show, The Flamingo Advantage, with a guy who is a coach, a life coach of sorts, but he's also an artist. And everywhere he goes, he wears these fun, funky shirts, right? Because that's his artistic expression. That's him coming out. And he just blends the two of those together. And sometimes he'll sell an art piece and it ends up turning into a coaching client. And sometimes they'll have a coaching client who sees something he's done artistically and buys one of his art pieces. And it all works together because he's not trying to separate who he is on the inside from what he does on the outside. And so you may not have a feather, you may not have a flamingo as your brand mascot, you may not be an artist, but there is something about you that is totally unique. Something in the way you were raised, something in your culture, something in your personal abilities or skills or talents, something in your education. Like there's something that makes you so unique. And this ties back to the flamingos too, Christopher, because every flamingo has their own unique voice. And so a flamingo will recognize its mate or its child or the other flamingos in its flock, its flamboyance, through hear voice. Right. And so all the flamingos might look exactly the same, but they know each other because their voices are different. So you may be out there in a whole flooded market of people who do what you do, but the people who need you are going to recognize your unique voice and they're going to come to you. You don't have to worry about the competition.
Yeah, I love that. And, it reminds me of this great quote. It's like, don't worry, because most people like on social media, you see them and it's basically kind of engineered that way. They want to have a certain persona or perception, and just stay in your lane, do what you do, keep adding value, and ultimately it's not a winner take all. It's more like we make the pie grow bigger. So very interesting. Talk about your recent book as well. You have a recent book, and talk about that and what it's about and how people can find it. And lastly, how can people contact you?
Yeah, thank you. You can reach us at theflamingoadvantage.com, find the book, find me, find our social, everything's there, the podcast and all. But the book is also called The Flamingo Advantage. And the Flamingo Advantage is about leveraging your uniqueness in your marketing. It's a bent more towards marketing and business, but leveraging that, staying relevant and being able to change your world, because relevancy is being in the heads of your people. It's being up to the topics of what's happening right now. If you want people to listen to you and trust you and pay you for your services or your products, you've got to be able to reach them where they are, answer the questions that they're asking, like be part of the conversation they're having. And our world is shifting so rapidly that it's super, super important for us to know those strategies to stay in the conversations that our people are having, not yesterday's conversations, right? Not tomorrow's, but in the ones that are here happening right now. And so that's what the book is all about. We also address some of the myths that people believe, particularly around being a Christian in business or having a business as a Christian, because that was our background. But it's a really great book, and we're excited. We just released the audio version as well, so that's also available at Audible.
Yeah, and for all the audience out there, really fascinating discussion. And I love this. Social media now, people have to learn how to use artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, all of the applications coming from there. Really, it's going to be a fantastic. If you're ready and you have the skill set. And all of Katie's resources will be in the links and show notes as well. Check out her book, The Flamingo Advantage. It's on Amazon as well. And with that, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you, Christopher. It's been a pleasure.